Foolish Tenno, do you realize your notice has sent you to die?
Hey everyone, CoolKid here. Captain Vor has long been an iconic part of Warframe, for reasons I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with. Despite being one of the game's first bosses, his fight is surprisingly complex after his rework in Isleweaver. On top of that, Vor received a secret superboss variation in the same update, making him much harder in exchange for some exclusive cosmetic rewards. When I say this made him harder, I mean much harder, as in, Janus Captain Vor is one of the hardest bosses in the entire game. So, in today's video, we're going to go over Vor's attacks, strategies for taking him down, and what rewards you get for defeating him. Do note that I'm going to start with an explanation of the standard Vor fight first, just to give myself a basis to build on, and then we'll take an in-depth look at Janus Vor. This video is also going to be primarily from the perspective of a solo player, as the accolade glyphs require solo play. Alright, without further ado, let's rock. Captain Vor is first battled very early in the player's journey, being found at Tolstoy on Mercury. Before you get to actually fight the boss, you've got to work your way through a few rooms and hallways, battling regular Grineer enemies along the way. Once you cross through this door, you'll enter Vor's arena, starting the fight proper.
Foolish Tenno, do you realize your notice has sent you to die?
Vor has 4 health bars, and each health bar is separated by an intermission phase, making 3 intermissions in total. Attacks from prior phases are typically carried over into subsequent ones, so keep that in mind. For Vor's first health bar, the first thing I want to mention is his penchant for teleporting. Vor will periodically teleport around the room, and he can do this both horizontally and vertically. This makes him difficult to track and hit, especially if you're going for headshots. In terms of damage, Vor will mostly rely on his basic attack, shooting the player with the mighty Seer. The Seer fires pretty slowly, having a fire rate of only 2 rounds per second, but it deals a surprising amount of damage, and it can inflict a 10-second puncture proc. Even with damage reduction from something like Adaptation, the Seer can still chunk a lot of your health, though its accuracy is quite bad, so keeping distance is a good way to avoid it. If the player is up close, Vor will engage with his Cronus, which isn't really all that special. Vor only has one ability in this phase, being his electric grenades. Vor will throw out a fan of 3 grenades in an arc, and upon contact with a surface, they'll expand over the course of about 3 seconds. Once they've fully expanded, they'll linger for about 5 seconds before disappearing. Contact with the zone they spawn will rapidly deal electric damage and apply a 4-second electric proc. These grenades can control a lot of space if left unchecked, but fortunately, they can be destroyed. The grenades can be shot in flight to break them, or you can shoot or slam the grenade at the heart of the arc sphere to destroy it. This attack doesn't deal a ton of damage, but in combination with Vor's high damage basic attack, it certainly shouldn't be ignored. After losing his first health bar, Vor will take cover inside of his bubble shield and call in 9 Grineer units, who spawn in groups of 3 from 3 different doors. This phase isn't really too hard, as all you have to do is kill the Grineer to make Vor vulnerable again. This phase is also one of the only times to activate on-kill conditional buffs, and it can also be used for orb generation if you're playing a frame like Citrine or Nezha. Once the enemies are dealt with, Vor enters Phase 2, which carries over his Phase 1 attacks along with a new ability. Periodically, Vor will grab his Janus key and lift it up into the air. While channeling this ability, several spots on the floor will be marked with yellow circles, and 3 seconds after this circle appears, a lightning strike will hit it. If the player is hit by this lightning strike, they'll take a stagger alongside a 4-second electric proc. Vor spawns 5 of these targeting circles at a time, and one of them will slowly track the player, while the others will simply appear around the room. Weirdly enough, despite the lingering lightning effects after a strike hits the ground, these zones do not deal any damage. Despite the menacing visuals, you're free to safely stand in the aftermath of a lightning strike, which is pretty unintuitive, but very useful. I also want to point out that Vor's casting animation leaves him very vulnerable, as he finally stops teleporting in order to channel the lightning. This serves as a great opportunity to blast him in the face, which is kinda tough otherwise. Once Vor's second health bar has been depleted, he will teleport into a second arena, requiring the player to pursue him through a series of hallways. This pursuit is not uncontested, however, as each hallway contains an array of lasers that sweep towards the entrance. These lasers deal high damage on contact alongside a beefy electric proc, so getting hit by them hurts quite a bit. Careful jumps and slides can be used to weave through the lasers, and after this is done twice, the player will arrive at an observation deck overlooking the second arena. We can go down the stairs and into this arena, which is where the boss fight really starts. Vor's third and fourth health bars both take place in this new arena, and it makes his fight much more complicated. So, in terms of layout, the room has one large central platform, as well as 4 smaller platforms arranged in a plus shape. Vor will teleport between these smaller platforms and the central platform, making him very hard to keep track of. Falling into the pit beneath the platforms doesn't deal damage, but it will dispel most abilities and place the player on the nearest platform, which might be right next to Vor. This leaves you wide open to attack, so it's far from ideal. It's also important to note that Vor can actually move these platforms, lowering either the central platform or all 4 secondary platforms. This is telegraphed by a loud buzzer sound, so it's easy to anticipate if you listen for it. This mechanic makes things much more claustrophobic, especially if the secondary platforms are lowered. As a pro tip, you can use wall bounces around the perimeter of the room to wait for the platforms to come back, as they're only gone for about 10 seconds. Do note that, for some reason, the wall with the observation window cannot be wall jumped or wall latched, so try to avoid that one. On to Vor himself. He no longer has access to his electric grenades in this phase, but he can still call in lightning strikes. Because the secondary platforms are so small, these strikes can cut off an entire platform until they expire, which is pretty dicey. Vor also controls space with a new ability, Electric Orb, where he summons a, well, electric orb above himself. This attack is actually signaled by a voice line, as Vor will shout either,
Cover me!
or
Grenier! Attack!
when calling it in. This orb rapidly deals damage to any players that stand near it, though fortunately it can be destroyed very quickly by shooting it. If the player is on the same elevation as Vor, then he can access another new ability, Laser Sweep. Vor will grab his Janus key and hold it in front of him, which is accompanied by a bright flash. After a brief delay, Vor will then fire a laser out in front of himself, slowly sweeping it in an arc. This laser isn't super hard to avoid if you jump, and it's pretty slow all things considered. Well, it's slow for now. Once Vor's third health bar has been dusted, he'll return to his bubble shield and activate 2 cannon batteries. These cannon batteries will fire bursts of 3 red orbs, which deal primarily puncture damage. These orbs are fired from a small red barrel, which also counts as a headshot when hit, increasing damage and charging incarnons. These cannon batteries are quite tanky, but they can be armor stripped by things like Shattering Impact, which makes them much easier to kill. Overall, this phase isn't too tough, so crush the cannons to push Vor into his final phase. Vor's 4th health bar is mechanically identical to his 3rd, but it's turned up to 11. Vor will now use all of his abilities faster, and he'll teleport much more often as well. There are no new attacks to watch out for in this phase, but the overwhelming nature of Vor's fighting style is on full display here. There's not a ton for me to explain beyond that, so do your best to keep your gun on Vor and keep the damage rolling until he's finally bisected. Once you defeat Vor, he'll drop the Captain Vor sigil, a mod from his mod drop table, and he also has a chance to drop the Cronus blueprint. Upon extract, the player will be granted a Seer piece, and on the Steel Path, he can drop the following arcanes: Arcane Battery, Arcane Power Ramp, Arcane Blessing, Arcane Steadfast, Primary Obstruct, Cascadia Flare, Secondary Surge, and Melee Vortex. But I know you don't care about any of that. What you're really here for is Janus Captain Vor. Before we get into the details of that fight though, I need to talk about some overarching mechanics that Janus Vor shares with the other superbosses. So, the first major thing to note is that Janus Vor is subject to Archon modifiers, which means a few things. For one, self-reviving is completely disabled, and dead players can only be brought back if Nidri is used. On top of that, Last Gasp's drain starts 2 seconds earlier with each use, and the bleed out timer is reduced every time a player goes down, to a minimum of 5 seconds. Spectres, on-call crew, and air support charges cannot be used during the Janus Vor fight, but they can be used before the fight starts, and the summons can follow you into the boss fight itself. Vor also gains increased health for each player present, with his health increasing by 33% if there are 2 players, 66% if there are 3 players, and 100% if there are 4 players. On the topic of tankiness, Vor is immune to armor stripping, and he has status reduction, meaning that he can only receive 4 stacks of any individual status effect. Beyond the Archon modifiers, Vor has access to a superboss classic, the Enhanced Magnetic proc. Several abilities in this fight will inflict a 3-second magnetic proc, which does the typical magnetic stuff. Drains 20 energy per second, scrambles the HUD, and disables natural shield regeneration. These attacks also have an additional effect, however, total ability nullification. If one of these attacks connects with a player, then all active abilities will be dispelled, and no new abilities can be cast for 3 seconds. This includes transference, preventing operator use, and you can even be hit with this nullification while in operator form, which prevents transference back to the Warframe until it expires. Do note that sources of status immunity, like Arcane Nullifier, can block the magnetic proc itself. This prevents the energy drain, HUD scramble, and shield recharge penalty, but the ability nullification will still go through. Janus Vor also has access to another superboss classic, Cascading Fragmentation. If 9 minutes have passed and Vor still hasn't been defeated, all players will be slapped with the Cascading Fragmentation debuff, which periodically deals damage. This debuff gains a new stack every 60 seconds, causing it to deal even more damage per tick, and it lasts until either Vor is defeated or all players die. This places a lot of stress on the player, forcing them to end the fight as quickly as possible, lest they be consumed by this mechanic. Now that we're through all of the overarching stuff, let's talk about how to actually access Janus Vor. Do note that, like the other superbosses, Janus Vor can only be accessed on the Steel Path. The method for unlocking this fight is pretty unique, and if you'd prefer that I don't spoil it for you, then now's your chance to jump ahead. If you're still here, then allow me to direct you to this Orpheon terminal, which can be found right before Vor's boss door. Interacting with the terminal reveals several rotating rings with symbols on them, and these symbols must be arranged in the correct order to enable the boss fight. So how do we discover the correct order? Well, to do that, we have to hunt for pairs of floating glyphs, which spawn around the map. These glyphs can only be seen in operator form, and when approached, they can be interacted with. 4 of these glyph pairs can be found in total, and if they were interacted with, they'll appear above the rings when using the terminal. These pairs of symbols do not show the correct order outright, but instead, they show what symbols are next to each other. Using this information, the correct order can be pieced together, and each time symbols are chained in the right sequence, the glyphs will update to reflect the discovery. Now, this probably sounds super annoying to do every time you want to fight the boss, so I'll let you in on a secret. The order is fixed. This means that, once you discover the correct order, you can just screenshot it and input it on subsequent runs. Alternatively, you don't even have to discover the order, as it's the same for everyone, meaning you can just find the screenshot on the wiki. Once the correct order has been entered, a notification will appear, letting us know that Janus Vor has been activated. Now it's time to get into how this fight is changed, and like before, we'll go phase by phase.
Foolish Tenno, do you?
The first major change is to Vor's Seer, which is on crack in this version of the fight. Not only has its fire rate been doubled, but it now has a multi-shot of 5, making it much more deadly. This thing is the biblically accurate Seer, and if your shield gate is down, it can easily insta-kill you. Even with high damage reduction, this attack is extremely dangerous, so be careful. Vor also uses his abilities with much greater frequency in this version of the fight, so he teleports and throws grenades a lot more often. On the topic of Vor's grenades, the casting animation is now sped up, and their cooldown is short enough that Vor will throw a new batch as soon as the previous one expires. This makes them a constant presence on the field, and the level increase makes them hurt much more if touched. This part of the fight isn't too hard, but it does a good job of establishing the fight's tempo. Vor's first intermission phase spawns only Eximus units, but other than that, it's exactly the same as the normal fight. These guys are really tanky, as you might expect, but they can be used to activate conditionals and the like. As Eximus units, they'll also drop health, energy, and ammo, which can be useful for restocking before going into Phase 2. Once Vor's second health bar has been reached, he'll gain access to his lightning strikes, which are much more dangerous now. Instead of only 5 strikes, Vor will call down 10, and being hit by a strike inflicts an enhanced magnetic proc. Fortunately, like before, the lingering pylon doesn't seem to do anything, so you can safely stand on it if needed. Vor's casting speed is much faster in this version of the fight, meaning that Vor is vulnerable for less time, the lightning strikes populate the arena faster, and the lightning strikes detonate in much quicker succession. During this phase, remain mobile and keep an eye on the floor. If the floor lights up, then find a safe spot as quickly as you can, and keep in mind that one of the strikes will try to follow you until it activates. Once Vor's second health bar has been depleted, we find ourselves back in the laser hallways. Janus Vor's lasers are much different than his normal counterpart, and the first thing you'll probably notice is that no abilities can be used, including transference. On top of that, the lasers appear in more complex patterns, and they move quite a bit faster. Lastly, lasers no longer deal damage or inflict an electric proc, but instead, they teleport the player back to the start of the hallway. This means that, while the lasers won't kill you, they can waste a lot of time, which is very bad. My biggest point of advice for this section is this: do not get greedy. Take it slow and watch for the next pattern so it can be dodged in time. As you approach the end of the hallway, you have less and less time to react, which makes things much more difficult, but don't start rushing once you're at the final stretch. I have had so many instances where I got clipped by a laser as soon as it spawned, sending me back to the beginning, so exercise restraint and only cross the finish line when you're sure you have time. Once we clear that James Bond-ass sequence, we find ourselves in Vor's second arena. This part of the fight is much harder than the first half, and that's for several reasons. For one, Vor teleports much more often, making him very hard to hit. Vor's lightning strike count is also increased to 10 in this phase, making his lightning cover a lot of ground. On top of that, he'll strike the central platform several times whenever he casts the strikes, making it a no-go zone much of the time. This is a total pain in the ass, as the central platform gives you the best vantage point on Vor, but fortunately it is safe after the strikes have concluded. I like to wait out the lightning and then hang out on the central platform during the safety window, as it makes Vor easier to damage. Beyond the lightning barrage, Vor's laser sweep now nullifies, and it is also much faster. This makes it very difficult to react to, so I recommend trying to stay on a different elevation from Vor so he doesn't use this ability. If you do have to level with Vor, then try to stay airborne so he doesn't drag the laser over you. Vor's electric orbs also nullify players they touch, but that's not the worst part. Electric orbs now spawn smaller orbs every couple seconds, which slowly track the player. Contact with these smaller orbs also nullifies, and because Vor casts his abilities more often, he'll spam the ever-loving fuck out of these orbs. The smaller orbs can be shot out like the larger orbs, and they also despawn if they remain active for too long, but I highly recommend preventing them from spawning altogether. If you hear Vor call out one of his reinforcement lines, find and shoot the electric orb as soon as you possibly can. Vor can place down several orbs at once in this version of the fight, and at that point, avoiding nullification is almost impossible. Do note that shooting an electric orb still releases a single smaller orb that will chase the player down, so stay mobile or shoot said orb to keep your abilities up. Electric orbs are extremely dangerous if left unchecked, so identify and destroy them as quickly as you can. Once Vor's third health bar is depleted, the cannon batteries will become active, and they are much stronger. Instead of 3-round bursts, the batteries will spew out a constant stream of red orbs, and they deal a lot of damage. On top of that, the batteries are especially resilient, so killing them can be quite time-consuming. If you have it, I recommend Vastalock with Shattering Impact for this part of the fight, as its armor strip makes the cannon batteries much easier to kill. Otherwise, stay mobile and focus on the red weak spot to take them out as fast as possible. Vor's final health bar is similar to his third, but his ability spam is off the charts. At this point, he will constantly teleport to a platform, spawn an electric orb, call in a lightning barrage, and then teleport to the next platform to repeat the process. This makes the arena super dangerous at all times, especially if any platforms are lowered, and it also makes electric orbs stack up very fast. This part of the fight is incredibly overwhelming, so do your best to keep your head on and focus on these things. Stay away from lightning spots, destroy electric orbs as soon as possible, and don't let Vor drag his laser over you. Now that we're through the mechanics of the fight, I want to talk about some general tips for completing it, starting with weapon recommendations. Janus Vor is a very difficult boss, in part because his damage attenuation is extremely aggressive, which is pretty rare in modern Warframe. For those who don't know, damage attenuation is a mechanic where, as an enemy takes damage, they gain damage reduction, which puts a damper on just how fast you can kill them. Vor's damage attenuation makes the player deal much less damage very quickly, which kind of puts a ceiling on just how much damage you can do in a given span of time. As such, there is an upper limit to just how much damage bonuses matter, so keep that in mind. I also recommend having a source of base damage that doesn't require kills to activate, like Primary Bulwark or Cascadia Flare. This fight features few minions, so maintaining on-kill buffs around the clock isn't really realistic. In terms of elements, Vor does take 50% more damage from Corrosive as he's a Grineer, but Corrosive procs don't reduce his armor. Personally, I really like Viral, Blast, and Cold for this fight. Viral makes Vor take more damage, Blast is able to deal bursts of bonus damage through detonations, and Cold slows Vor down, making him much easier to react to. In terms of individual weapons, I find that crit weapons with a high fire rate are the best for Vor, as they're generally the least affected by Vor's damage attenuation. Precision weapons are also very good in this fight, as Vor takes much more damage from headshots, though it can be quite difficult to actually hit him in the face. Scourge can help make up for this, as its thrown attack spawns bubbles that direct rounds towards the head. But there are some considerations. For one, Vor's Seer is held at just the right angle to not be caught by Scourge, so it can't consistently protect you from Vor's basic attack. It can catch the electric grenades in the first half of the fight though, which is pretty funny. It can also be a struggle to actually stick Vor with the bubble, as he teleports around super often, but if you wait for him to channel his lightning barrage, then it's not too hard. If you are going to rely on precision hits, Acuity mods are great for this fight, but if you aren't landing headshots consistently, then multi-shot is the safer bet for sure. Incarnins are typically my go-to for this fight, as the lack of ammo drops doesn't affect them too much, and they're all just incredibly powerful weapons regardless. While many weapons work, my personal recommendations are the Burston Prime, Sybaris Prime, Dual Toxicists, and Sicarus Prime, which all fry Vor remarkably fast. Prisma Angstrom is also very good, as it can be charged without headshots, and it deals a lot of damage. If you decide to use Scourge alongside Angstrom, then the bubbles will redirect the Incarnin projectiles into Vor multiple times, which is especially strong. Honestly though, my top recommendation for this fight has to go to Latum. It deals a ton of damage even on body shots, it's able to stack up Cascadia Flare with ease, its AoE makes near misses pretty forgiving, and as an Incarnin, ammo isn't really a concern. So long as you can hit Vor in the head from time to time, this gun is fantastic, but plenty of options work quite well. Personally, I don't really like melees in this fight, as being close to Vor is very dangerous, especially in the second arena. Even so, I found that glaives are pretty strong in their own right, as their DOTs can deal a ton of damage, even in spite of the attenuation. Me though, I like using Vastalok with Shattering Impact for the cannon batteries. Looking at helmet abilities, you can always opt for the usual suspects. Roar, Nourish, and Zata's Whisper are all exceptionally powerful, being big boosts in damage. The thing is, because this fight's damage attenuation is so aggressive, it's often the case that you aren't really getting that much extra damage out of these abilities. They will certainly help, sure, but not quite as much as you might expect. As such, it can be useful to take other subsumes that do things like increasing survivability or granting utility. At the same time, damage attenuation isn't permanent, so if you aren't hitting Vor constantly, then his damage reduction will rapidly go down. This makes damage subsumes much more useful so long as you're hitting Vor in short bursts, as opposed to a more constant stream of damage. Now, one of the hardest parts of this fight is actually surviving it. Between the nullification, the electric procs, and the mighty Seer's 5 billion damage per trigger pull, staying alive can be a tall order. As such, I want to go over some survivability strategies to help keep you safe. Do note that a lot of this stuff is going to be brought over from my video about the Guilty, so if you've already seen that, then you're welcome to jump ahead. If you're still here, I want to talk about the secret sauce that makes any frame of Borderline immortal: catalyzing shields. To explain why this mod is so broken, I first need to explain how shield gating actually works. So, put simply, shield gating works like this. When your shield breaks, there's a brief window where your health can't take damage. Shield quantity affects how long the invincibility is, and it varies quite wildly. The minimum shield gate duration is 0.33 seconds of invincibility, while the maximum is 2.5 seconds, which is achieved at 1,150 shields. Shield gating also takes into account your highest shield amount before your shields broke. To explain what I mean, say you have that maximum 2.5 second shield gate when your shields are full. Your shields don't have to immediately break from full for you to get that 2.5 second shield gate, but your shields do have to reach full at least once before they break. If your shields break and then start regenerating, but only make it halfway full before breaking again, then you'll only get 1.25 seconds of shield gating, as that's the highest value you reached before they broke again. You can tell if your full shield gate is ready by looking for this sort of energized effect on your shield bar, as it signals that your shield gate is fully charged. With that explained, let's look at catalyzing shields, which reduces shield capacity by 80% in exchange for a 1.33 second full shield gate duration. The idea behind this mod is pretty simple. Lower the player's shield quantity so it's easier for them to get their full shield gate. Here's what makes it broken though. The 1.33 second shield gate duration is always in effect, not just when your shields are full. This means that, if you gain even one shield point before they break again, you'll get the full 1.33 second duration. So catalyzing shields is great, especially in combination with mods like Brief Respite or the Augur set, as ability casts restore shields. But with energy being a limited resource in these boss fights, there's another method that I find even more effective: recharge delay reduction. By using both Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor, we can reduce our shield recharge delay to a measly 0.2 seconds, making our shields start recharging almost instantly. Shields don't naturally begin recharging until after shield gate invincibility is ended, but even so, that's an incredibly small window where you're vulnerable. The main weakness with this strategy is that magnetic procs do halt natural shield regeneration, which prolongs your vulnerability window, but once the effect wears off, your shields will recharge almost instantly. You can also take Arcane Nullifier to block the magnetic proc itself, which blocks the shield recharge penalty and keeps shields up almost 100% of the time. This combination of items, Arcane Nullifier, Catalyzing Shields, Fast Deflection, and Vigilante Vigor, makes you almost impossible to kill. The 0.2 second vulnerability window is so short that the only way you'll realistically die is if you're fast asleep or get exceptionally unlucky. There are still other survivability strategies I'm going to discuss, but know that this lineup is extremely powerful, even by itself. On the topic of shields, Arcane Aegis is also incredibly good in this fight, as it causes your shields to regenerate constantly while active. It isn't super reliable if you use Aegis exclusively, but in tandem with other forms of shield restoration, it can be a very valuable layer of redundancy. I also think it's important to bring up Rolling Guard, as its invincibility and status cleanse are super useful in this fight. You can use the invincibility window to stay alive while your shield gate is down, and the status cleanse can be used to save yourself from any electric procs that might be threatening to kill you. The main issue with Rolling Guard is that I roll to dodge things all the time, so I put it on cooldown accidentally, but if that's not an issue for you, then it's very worth using. The nice thing about all of these strategies is that they can be used together, and while it is very expensive to do so, they also make you extremely safe. Arcane Persistence is also a totally viable way to survive, so long as you avoid getting nullified. If you grab the Furus Incarnate and slap on the Winds of Purity Augment, you'll be almost impossible to kill so long as you're damaging Vor. This can be tough on account of all the teleporting, and nullification is pretty hard to avoid in this fight, so keep that in mind. I wouldn't personally use this strategy, but I have seen others find great success with it, so I wanted to point it out. When I first did all of my Accolade clears, I relied very heavily on Bazarin, as both Protective Sling and Guardian Shell help a lot in this fight. Guardian Shell can be used to block shots from Vor's pocket shotgun, and Protective Sling is extremely spammable so long as you aren't nullified. I will say that, if you're gonna rely on Bazarin, you need to be aware of Vor's waxed floors. In the second boss arena, if you Void Sling into the ground, it's very easy to just slide right off the platforms into the pit below. As such, you'll want to Void Sling upwards to avoid slipping, or you can just be an idiot like I am and fall off the map half the time. Now that we've covered all of the mechanics and strategy, what do you actually get for conquering Janus Captain Vor? Well, upon your first completion, you'll receive a new ship decoration, the Janus Key Sumdali. This lets you rock a Void Key as a hood ornament, and if you ask me, it's one of the better looking Sumdalis, even if it doesn't really fit with my ship fashion. In addition to the Sundali, Janus Vor has 6 accolade glyphs, which are awarded for defeating him solo with the following frames: Korra, Hildren, Limbo, Atlas, Chroma, and Citrine. Upon collecting all 6 of these glyphs, the player will receive a unique Honoria, the Void Called to Me. Considering just how difficult this boss fight is, it's quite the flex to rock this title, especially because Limbo is in the accolade lineup. If you're struggling to get any of these accolades for yourself, I'll leave a playlist of commentated accolade runs in the description. There, I'll show my builds, talk about my thought process, and show a full run of the boss with each frame. Do note that I already have the glyphs, so you won't see them actually drop, just to make sure you aren't confused. Alright, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. Janus Vor is the game's second hardest fight in my opinion, with his mobility and nullification making him very overwhelming. Hopefully this guide has made the mechanics of the fight clearer, and if you enjoyed, feel free to like and sub and all that. I don't really feel like doing the YouTuber stuff this time around, so I guess the video's over now. Okay, how do I want to do this? Do I just like read it in a normal voice? Just look at them. They come to this place when they know they are not pure. Tenno used the keys, but they are mere trespassers. Only I, Vor, know the true power of the Void. I was cut in half, destroyed, but through its Janus key, the Void called to me. It brought me here, and I was reborn. We cannot blame these creatures. They are being led by a false prophet, an impostor who knows not the secrets of the Void. Behold the Tenno, come to scavenge and desecrate this sacred realm. My brothers, did I not tell of this day? Did I not prophesize this moment? Now I will stop them. Now I am changed, reborn through the energy of the Janus key, forever bound to the Void. Let it be known, if the Tenno want true salvation, they will lay down their arms and wait for the baptism of my Janus key. It is time. I will teach these trespassers the redemptive power of my Janus key. They will learn its simple truth. The Tenno are lost, and they will resist. But I, Vor, will cleanse this place of their impurity. I don't know why I agreed to this, but this is as much proof as anyone needs as to why I don't voice act in things.